This is our 157. This is the lecture on how to use um, Unreal assets. Specifically, we'll be looking at static meshes and materials and skeletal meshes. So here's a simple level that I created. Let's just build it real quick so you can see. Okay, and play from here. Let's go around and look at it. And you can see this is literally one brush, two brush, three brushes with a hollow and a doorway, and that's it. So let's start to look at how we can actually make this into something more visually interesting. Something I did to save time, and you can play around with this, is I created a collection. So rather than having to dig into all these packages and find all this different content, I basically drug each item into this little folder. The other thing you want to notice, just to kind of make you aware, is that if you go and you check the content, there's a lot more content in both of these folders than you actually see. Anytime you see this little square with the yellow, that basically means that the item hasn't been loaded yet. And there's a lot of content that I would say about 1/3 automatically loads, and the other part doesn't. So what you can do is you can highlight the UDK game and right click and choose fully load, and then I'll load everything. I'm going to do that just for the demo so you can just see. So actually you can also select the different objects and load them as well. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. The instant that you drag anything into the scene, it's going to load itself anyway. So let's break down, just look at materials. So I'm just going to drag one material and assign it to the floor. And if we look at this pretty quick, we got a lot of repetition. If I come out, you can kind of start to see the seam and those types of things. So what we want to do is we want to see whether or not we can adjust that. The other thing that we want is we want to see if we can have the floor go to here and then also to this surface back here. Now if I go to render this out real quick and we go to play and you go look at this, you're going to see there's this really strange seam. Now the two ways that you know the seam exists is, one is the sizes are different, and we'll also look at the second thing, which has to do with the shadows. So if I go back and I select each by holding down the control key and clicking the left mouse button, each of these areas, and I hit F5, which pulls up the surface property editor. Each item, each brush has its own default UV items, which is how it maps the texture. Now if I click planar and hit apply, it applies the same proportions to everything. And then also, if I want to make these bigger, right now it's doing a 1 by 1, which is how it's repeating. If I told it I want to do a 0.5 by 0.5 and hit apply, now it's basically going to double the size of the texture. So if you went to 2 by 2, it would make it half as small. So that's probably good for getting everything set up. We still have this seam here though, so let me go and show you what I'm talking about. Is that seam. Now this seam is optically created. It has nothing to do with the geometry. This is perfectly flat. But if you remember, the way that the light is calculated is there's vertex points where the light is calculated, and then the based on what's called your light map resolution, which is basically how many sampling points you have in a certain area. The higher the number, the less sampling points. So what's happening with this dark line is there's a sample point over here and here, and they're blending together. There's no sample point in the middle. So if I want to add a sample point, also this will change. You see the shadow's a little sloppy on this. So if I change this to 4 and then hit enter, you don't have to hit apply or anything like that. And if I go to build this again, all of a sudden you see we have this really nice defined shadow, and the edges and the seam isn't visible at all. So now if I go in and play this again and look at it, you see that seam is completely gone. So that's some handy techniques to have for that. So let's just put a texture on the ceiling real quick, just so we can take care of that. So I'm going to drag this, and also you see once I assign that, the little square went away. So I'm going to assign this to the ceiling, and once again I'm getting this repetition tile, so I'll highlight it, hit F5. Now the thing to be aware of is it defaults back to your old settings, because this is what I did for the floor. Now I could keep it as well and hit apply, and that's okay, but just be aware that if you go and you select something else, like if I select this wall, it's not going to change. It's going to show what was before, which is kind of unfortunate. The other thing is the light map resolution. That will change dynamically based on what surface you select. So at least if nothing else, you can kind of be aware of what's happening with that. Okay, so we got those two areas set. So let's go into the room and see if we can start to add some materials to the room as well. I'm going to go and add this plaster texture, and I'm going to assign it to each of the walls. And as I'm doing this, you probably will notice that there's some mapping issues. So if I go in and I select each of these walls, let's see, grab that, and hopefully I didn't just move something. Okay, so we have all this surface is selected. I'm going to do an F4 F5, sorry, F5 once again. And if I go back and I do a planar and hit apply, you can see that what it did is change the mapping. And because I had the 0.5, if I go back to the 1, the way that this is mapping and I hit apply is it's stacking the material twice. So I don't want to do that. I just want to stack it once. And I hit apply. And now the other thing is we have this seam that looks a little off. So these buttons are for moving the texture around. So if I hit 1, you see that this is shifting it sideways. And if I hit V, which would be for up, so you have to think about U as X, V as Y. And if I start to hit this, I'll hit 4 units to make it a little bit more aggressive. And then when I get close, I'll start to do the 1 again. So you can get that. So now all of a sudden you have the dark area, which will help to accentuate that. It doesn't look funny anymore. So we have that taken care of. Let's put something on the floor. So I'm just going to grab a, let's see, where's the mesh? There it is. Okay. And if we look at this, we're going to play around with this. So if I hit F5, sorry, I keep on doing that. F5, I'm going to try doing fit and hit apply. And what that does is it stretches the texture to be exactly 1 unit for whatever size of the surface is, which in this case looks a little funny because it's really distorted. But the nice thing about this is you can start to play around and you can explicitly control the mapping. So if I want this to start to look like it's something like a square, if I say I want 4, which is going to give me 4 repetitions across by 20, and I hit apply, now all of a sudden I have 20 going this way and 4 going this way. And if I keep this increasing this and apply, eventually I can get to the point that it actually looks like a square. So you see that you kind of have some power and benefit in being able to use that and specifically use it. Likewise, if I do the same thing with the ceiling, I'm going to come in and grab this and apply it, pull up the, actually I have it open, but it's hiding, there it is. And we do, once again, let's just go back to 1 by 1 and hit fit and apply, and we have that. And then if I want to change this, let's do this 4 by 8 and apply and see what we get. Okay, so you can see, and you can play around with these dynamically and do whatever you want. Trying to change it 3 by 6 and apply, and then we got that. Okay. Now the other thing to remember on all these surfaces is I haven't increased the light map resolution, although the surface still has it at 4. So any shadows that are calculated on these walls are going to be, it's not going to be as precise and as definite. So let's go in, and now that we have those done, let's look at basically doing this wall. So I'm going to come in and pull a different item right here, and I'm going to assign that to the wall, and also I'm going to assign this to the doorway. And we'll play around with this a little later, but I just want you to see kind of what's happening with this. Now at this point, if you look at the doorway, you'll see that the mapping is funny on the inside. So let's go in and add and select all these surfaces. So these 4 surfaces, and get that one, and pull up. And let's do a planar, and set this back to this 1 by 1, hit apply. And now you see what happens is it basically maps everything except for right here, which is off. Now if I do a box and hit apply, now it reorients that. So when you do planar, the thing that happens is it basically only projects it in one direction, but box basically projects it in 2 directions, the texture. Actually from 3, because it would do it from the top as well, so it's doing from the side, the front, and the top. But now we get something that's completely aligned, and the spacing on this looks a little funny. So now I can do the same thing again of do point, let's do a 5.25 by 0.25, so that's going to do the quarter of the mapping. And hit apply, and now you see we got kind of a nice spacing. So now the last thing we're going to look at once we got the wall is to come in, and I just wanted to show you a little bit of detail on the floor here. So you want to go in and select that area, and what we want to do is we're going to assign a different material onto it to kind of make it look more like a transition point. And you can see right now the orientation's wrong. So what we want to do is let's go and hit F5 and go in, and we're going to tweak this and also rotate it. And now you see we have a more realistic transition, basically by using the 90 degrees to rotate the material, which is another handy technique to have and be aware of. So at this point, we're just going to build everything and see what we got. And let's go in and walk around the space. You can see that we have kind of a weird optical event that's happening. This is a result of the light mapping. So what we need to do is we'll get out of this mode once we check everything else and select basically all the surfaces, and I'm going to change light mapping on everything, all the brushes, to 4, which is going to be a higher resolution. It'll give me cleaner shadows. And now if I go to render again, do build old, it should look fine when we walk through it. So you can see there's much sharper shadows and edges. We don't have that weird glowing issue anymore. And once we start to add static meshes and other objects, it'll look more realistic. So let's go by doing that. Now there's no light in this room. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you another technique. So we're going to grab just one of the static meshes that comes by default with Max or with Unreal, and we're going to go in and scale it and position this item against the wall. Just give me a minute to get it set up. And there is a lot of stuff, and just remember that you want to do fully load in order to see everything through the content browser. So you can see we got some lights, and what I want to do once I get this adjusted is to come in, and I'm going to open up, and I want to go in and locate the option that basically enables me to say use emissive for lighting. It's under light mask, so you go under static component, use emissive for lighting, and if you see right now, emissive is the part that glows. So you can see right now that's being illuminated. So what this is going to do is, when we go to render, it's actually going to take that value off of the texture or the material and bounce it through the space. In order to do this, you only get this with light mask. So I have to go back into world properties, turn on light mask, and we'll render it out and see what we get. Okay, let's go play in the space, and now you can see all of a sudden we have the space illuminated by the way that the emissive texture. And there's a little bit of an error there. I'm not quite sure. It goes away by the end of this demo, but I think it has something to do with the light mapping and using emissive as opposed to the other lights. And like I said, it'll go away, so we'll just continue. So let's put some lighting at the other end. So I'm going to go back to content browser, and I'm going to grab, that's the rocket launcher ammo, so it's a little small, and position that against the wall and scale it. Now remember, you can scale stuff. If you start to see the texture breaking apart, you probably have scaled it too much, but at the same time you can get a lot of flexibility, and also you don't necessarily have to scale something evenly in all 3 axial directions. So that's something to keep in mind that you can change and just to be aware of. So I'm going to hold down Alt key, drag off a copy, and let's go and turn on, once again, use emissive for lighting for both these objects, and build. And once we're done, let's go and see what we got. Okay, so you can see this is pretty bright and pretty burned out. So the nice thing is there's these options that you can adjust the emissive characteristics that light mask calculates. So one is basically called the boost, and the other one's the fall off. So what we want to do is we want to change both of those. We'll cut the boost in half, and we'll cut the fall off in half as well. And now when we go to build this again, it'll look a lot cleaner, and you can go in and